right?
Yeah, okay. I understand that's very similar to the mechanism of how it works. Also, you mentioned that you guys are modified Linux kernel. So why not Bhar OS is not open source yet? Because Linux has GPL licensing, which basically enforces anyone who uses Linux in their products to make it open source. We at Cypher OS also publish it publicly, and all the other projects who are from all over the world, they also publish the Linux sources. So why
Yeah,
it's not available yet?
yeah. It is not available because we have what I would call organizational reasons. Okay. Now, there are two parts, like you mentioned. One is that if you do work on the kernel, then yes, what you're saying is correct. But the kernel, Linux kernel, also provides mechanism to load binary blobs into the kernel. I know as an open source enthusiast, it's not what do you say? It's not a good thing to do, but commercial realities are where when you work with MediaTek or you work with any of
No,
the SOC vendors,
no,
you
no,
need to load stuff from the vendor partition. You need to deal with non-open source components.
No, that's totally fine, which you are talking about, that you need to load the binaries from the vendor. But still, those binaries are not included in the kernel source tree. So you are actually liable to publish that to the open source because the GPL licensing by Mr. Linus Torvalds, who is the founder of Linux, which basically states that you need to open source the kernel source tree. You are not liable to release the Win the MediaTek or the quick Qualcomm proprietary or Google Tensor proprietary blob binaries and blobs, but you are liable to release the kernel sources. And it is very disappointing to see that if you are planning to release an Indian OS and there is no transparency between the developers, users, and the commercial team. Yeah, because even all the OEMs, let's say Realme, Chinese OEMs, they use the MediaTek devices, they use the Qualcomm devices. They are also releasing it. So why not Bhar OS is releasing it? This is not a commercial point of view. We
Yeah,
understand, but
Aryan, I mean, I totally understand, where you're coming from. Okay, I don't get to make those decisions. Let me make that very simple. Now, in terms of others, releasing their kernel sources and things like that, to me, that is also a little misleading because we work with, providers, the hardware providers, and our recommendation to them is to basically put that into mainline Linux. So I would say that wherever it is practically possible, we encourage people to what we call uh, put the code in mainline because that helps everyone and it makes it what I would call future proof. You know, but in terms of us working, because as you are aware, there are a lot of distributions, open source, custom ROM distributions. These are all very welcome things. But for it to be sustainable, for it to become successful, it needs to become commercially successful. It needs to gain wider adoption, and that's one of the reasons why I would say that we need to walk a very fine line in terms of balancing both sides.
if you are still using a downstream version of
Aryan,
Linux,
Aryan, Aryan, sorry to interrupt. Uh, we have other friends. On to Jian. Jian, we have a wonderful discussion right now going on. I'm sure a lot of clarity has been showcased from ours. Can you share your opinion?
Did you just ano? Ayar? Here is my
Yes.
question about for OS. You said it's running on private app store services. What if people want to use Google as their primary services? Do they have an option to use Google or there's something else other than that?
No, we don't encourage that. And yes, I'm familiar with the OpenG apps and the other other efforts that are going on. Google, we recommend that they go with mainstream Android.
Since it's for every Indian, right? Since it's for every Indian, I think it's Google is essential because um, most of the apps are required by Google services. But what if people want to doesn't have Google services but they want to use it for OS?
See, those are there are no easy answers to that. Right? Google services essentially, we believe collect a lot more data from you then they need to provide the services that they do. Okay. So that's again a business decision that they're perfectly entitled to make, and they'll make that and they move in that direction. For us, data privacy and data protection is the main crux of what we are doing. The ability to give the people who use this to make their own decision in terms of which apps they're able to load, which apps they can use, which apps they can remove, and ability to have more control over the devices that they own. That is what we are trying to do. There's been a lot of social acceptance for Bhar OS. It seems to have resonated very well with a lot of people. And we realize that puts a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. So we are balancing it because we need to make sure we need to make sure we're around 10 years from now. And that's how we would be able to make this successful. So that's kind of what I would say. Again, going back to the philosophy in terms of our decision making process, that's how it is.
How can we know if Bhar OS is not collecting data from the users or us?
Um, we don't need to collect any data, right? I mean, people say you need telemetry data. Why do you need telemetry data? You know, um, OS is just a thin layer. Does the Linux kernel collect any data from people? No, it doesn't. It's the apps that collect data. And it's the apps that send data to different servers out there. That's all those things. So I would say, the crux of it is that do you own your digital life? If you don't, what part of your digital life you control at least? You know? Yes, people are used to different services, and most people probably may not understand or realize the importance of owning their own data. But that's something that's kind of important to us, and that's kind of been the basis on which we started this journey. So data protection is the crux of what we stand for.
That's a really enlightening answer, Mr. Karthik. Because I do agree that the Linux obviously does not collect any data, and that's a good philosophy. On to Mr. Pranav. Pranav, are you there? Hello. Yes.
Am I audible?
Can you share your yes, you're audible. Mr. Karthik has shared his opinions on this. What is your view on?
Um, I would first like to start by asking what security myths do you think your OS has debunked or could debunk in the future?
Um, no, that's a can of worms, right? Security myths. Let's see. I would say that what we have is intentional complexity, fundamentally. It's actually a very good question. It's making me think as we speak. The fundamental thing about intentional complexity is that once you start using something, you start believing that's the only way of doing it. You know? I mean, for example, I think I use this example to people is we all know that when the Americans went to space, um, when they came back, they were very proud of announcing the ballpoint pen. They spent millions of dollars because ink, when in zero gravity situation, ink doesn't go to paper. So they came up with the ballpoint pen and they used it to write stuff in space. You know. And then some people went to the Russians and they basically asked them, you guys also went to space. What did you do? They said use a pencil. So, in terms of security myths, I'll tell you the first security myth is that only large companies can provide data security. That's the first myth. If you store your data in a USB drive, you remove the drive from any officially connected device. It's the data is with you. If you're concerned about your data, physically being damaged or lost or whatever, then you can encrypt the data and store it in, somewhere on the internet. Because I'm old school, I've been on the internet since 1989. So I would say that protocols like SSH and RC are more than sufficient. There are enough tools out there that can encrypt your data, maintain all the data, and then put it out there, and then you can synchronize it so whatever device that you use, you'll be able to do it. So the first and the only security myth I'd like to ask is that whatever solutions um, BugTech is providing, they are intentionally complex, and you don't need.
Okay.
They're good enough.
Yeah, it was a very good. Also, I would like to ask, how has Bhar OS's development been affected by your views, like your views
I'm
on
sorry, can you repeat the
cybersecurity?
question?
How has Bhar
Yeah.
OS's development cycle been affected by your views on cybersecurity?
Um, Actually, it has had no impact because, to be honest with you, if you need to support Android apps, you have to do it the Android way. And Android way is not necessarily the most optimum way. Just to give you, because this is a technical audience, let me just get into that. The only two and probably now these days only one module that Android uses. It's called the binder module for IPC. That and shared memory are the two main kernel modules that Android depends on. So, and the binder is, it comes because of what I would call historical decisions of the BOS and things like that. Um, Linux already has a better IPC mechanism, name files, for example. Um, why those were not used, I don't know. So some of the decisions that were made in Android are intentionally complex in my view. Um, and if you simplify it, you're going to get better security, better reliability, and all that. But then the world is moving. What I would call commercial considerations, where those decisions will great. So you can make the decision using Android apps, but then to make the decision to implement it in Android apps, when you want to run Linux apps, then end users are going to be affected by it because they're used to using devices in a certain way. You know, so yes, um, uh, will we get to untangling, this intentional complexity? I hope so, but that would require time and what I would call a market respect, I suppose, and that's going to happen. I hope it happens.
I think we should go back to Mr. Aryan. He's been edging on to clear a few doubts of his. Aryan, you're up.
Okay, one more question from my side.
Yeah.
You said that you took the USB, you implemented your own interface on it with some NPAWS changes. So I saw in one of your conferences in which you were displaying the screenshots of the Bhar OS. I saw Android keyboard as a pre-installed default keyboard app. So if you are trying to make an alternative to everything, why haven't you guys moved towards your own system apps and still using the rich Android chips?
That's a good point. Our view is that if there are open source or even closed source developers out there who have developed these modules, and we have no problem bundling those system apps as part of the solution that we offer to customers. Um, I would say that the focus for us has always remained on the OS side, not necessarily on the app side or the user experience side. While we understand those things, we in fact even have, I would say, we have had requests for people saying that you know so much about security, why don't you do a messaging ecosystem or app system or whatever? Yes, we have certain ideas in terms of how that can go. But practically speaking, it's going to take some time before that happens. You know, for example, uh, my view of what an end user needs to do and what an app developer does is essentially it's just identity and data. So if you can provide a common service where identity and data are interlinked, and developers can just do a HTTP in and HTTP out to the data, and they don't really care where it goes, where it ends up. Yeah, you may have a what I would call a utopia world where the user gets to own their data again. Um, but that's a tall order in terms of how it comes out and when it comes out. So we need to make baby steps towards in that direction.
Okay. Uh, One of the final questions on my side.
Yeah,
Hmm. So, as you said that you are currently not mainline, right? So you're using a downstream fork of Linux kernel, correct?
yeah, that's correct.
So, what makes you think that it cannot be open source? Because I myself have worked with the various OEMs, and I currently work on the stockroom development for one of them smartphone brand. And we
Yeah,
also use the downstream kernel versions. We are shipping 5.10, and mainline is I think 6.2, I think.
yeah,
So we also release those downstream versions because it makes more sense because to respect the licensing of the Linux kernel.
yeah.
So my question is again that why
I,
even though
it's
even
like
from the
this. I,
yeah
I agree. I agree with you on a personal basis, but when it comes to what I would call legal or commercial decisions, those are defined by contracts.
yeah
It's, it's as
but
simple as that. So
but
it varies from OEM to OEM, device manufacturer to device manufacturer. I can't, there isn't one single formula that works across. For example, even the bootloader, right? The If you look at the industry, they've gone, it started with U-boot, okay,
yes
and Android called it A-boot. Why they called it A-boot, only God knows, okay. And in U-boot, if you look at how it has evolved or how it has morphed, it's a big hairball today. Does it need to be as complex as it is? No, it doesn't have to be. But then, can you change the bootloader? You can't. And if you look at the SoC vendors, they've moved more in terms of they've gotten into what are known as preloaders, and
yes
it's not a happy situation, right? It's not a simple situation. So we need to work with that. As
yeah
much as you
yeah
personally like it, and we personally, I may personally like it. There is what I would call, being pragmatic about the decisions we make.
Mhm. Yeah, but even from the commercial point of view, you are not requested or advised to release those U-boot sources, but you can just release the kernel tree. But nevertheless, I think that that may change in your future or after this conference, maybe some
I hope
changes will.
so. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we can see, and also what all devices are with support as of now.
See, as of now, I would say the um, processors, we worked with MediaTek processors. We have worked with Spectrum Unisoc processors.
Yeah.
We have worked with Qualcomm processors. So it's basically with the reference designs of the SoCs, we're able to work with them.
Okay. Any plans shipping Bhar OS in near future?
See, that is unfortunately, it's a commercial decision, right? It's not a, so currently solutions of, borrower solutions are going in what I would call closed, private networks.
Okay. I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so we can shift to Jian. Do you have anything to add to the discussion, Jian?
Here's my last question for my side. What are your goals to reach the expectations of every users that use your product or the Bar OS?
Ah, boy. uh, I mean, I would say, if I were to say it in simple terms, I want every user to own their digital identity. I want them to own their digital life. I want them to own their own data, and I want them to make the decision whether they share it with others or not. And BarOS is, in my view, the first step towards that independence. Owning your own digital. Basically, you need to own your own ID. That's how I look at it.
All right, I think the panelists here are done with their questions. Mr. Karthik, we had mentioned that we have about a 2 lakh strong community, and they were quite eager to ask their questions on. Obviously, we cannot take 2 lakh questions in. So we have taken down a few questions. I hope you can share your views and answer them to their satisfactions.
Sure.
Ayan, you are.
Hello, Mr. Karthik. Thank you for joining in today.
My pleasure. Hmm.
So here are some questions the community wanted to ask. How did you get involved in Android development? Have you previously worked on any AOSP projects, or is this your inaugural project in this domain?
This is in AOSP. This is inaugural. I've been observing how it has evolved from 1.0 days, but not on a technical manner. Technical manner, I would say it's only been in the last 3-4 years, I suppose.
I see. So another question was
So I
you.
have, I mean, in terms of my open source contributions, I've done some contribution to Dropbear, which is a SSH server that's distributed widely in what you call, on the internet. I suppose a lot of embedded devices have them. Um, there's some stuff on my GitHub, I suppose, some Python code and things like that. But yeah, I uh, I would say that I come from a background where I understand it's old school, so I understand things at a low level.
Okay, so moving on. The second question was Bhar OS as a project affiliated with IIT gained significant attention upon its announcement some time ago. However, there were no public samples or opportunities for beta or alpha testing. Was this decision intentional?
Yes, it is intentional because when we do anything in public, the expectations are very high. For example, we never considered, um, um, you know, um, uh, it's we never considered a consumer rollout, or we never anticipated that consumers would be very eager to get used to this. But we realize today that that is something that we need to be working on, and we are working on that. And it is a tall order because, as you're aware, consumer devices they get paid for loading an OS.
Yes.
And our value proposition is we are going to the people who are making the devices and saying, "You pay us." So they look at it as a double penalty. You know, so it is not a easy what do you call? It's not an easy thing to crack into. Even if consumers are willing to pay us directly, the electronic manufacturing is a volume game. So unless, let us say, we make a million devices, then you're not going to be cost competitive in terms of. So the user's expectation is, we want to be able to go out and buy a 5,000 or a 7,000 or a 10,000 rupee phone, and we want borrowers in it. That is uh, technically it's possible. Practically it requires, we need to be in a different league for us to be able to do that. I've been on some public stages and I said, if someone has $200 million to spare, please contact us. We'd love to launch a phone with borrowers in it. So that's kind of where that is.
Also, why do you think Bhar OS gained such a widespread interest in the tech
I,
community?
I think it resonates well with two things. Number one, what it stands for. We don't want your data. You need to own your own data. Own your ID, own your data. And people are tired of all the apps that are coming on the phone, and even what they call plain vanilla versions and things like that. It comes with more apps than people need. Number one. And number two, I would always say, look at look at a situation where usually when people who have laptops, they'll call their grandson or their nephew or whatever to come and fix it for them, install this, do that. That's how the world works. And why can't you do that for your Android phone? You can't. You know. So I would say the two things that actually resonated well with people. The first one was no default apps, and the second was private app stores. Because people at some level they realize that it's all about independence. That they no longer dependent on these companies and their policies, and for them to own their digital identity and their data. That's essentially what it is. I
Oh,
think so.
the the data protection thing you said, many customers like Graphene OS have already done it in the past. How is Bhar OS different from anything like Graphene OS or Lineage OS?
See, Graphene OS is a Graphene lineage. These are all wonderful projects, right? And they have done some extremely good technical work, you know. But it remains a niche because it is focused on what do you say? What I would call people who are technically extremely sound to benefit from it. And I think there are a few organizations out there that do Graphene OS loading and selling devices with that or whatever, and that is good. Our view is that the OS is not, number one, it's not restricted just to mobiles. It's there in routers. It's there in anything that needs an OS. You can use the same principles. Devices that don't need a UI and human interaction can benefit from the same things. Same philosophies. No telemetry, no fast boot, making sure that the data is yours, ability to install apps remotely through a centralized mechanism. These are all things that are built, can be built on top of Linux. We don't see any other distribution that has kind of tried to focus on what I would call this approach. You know, so that's where we think Bhar OS is different.
Will you be also working on a laptop OS like one that can run on 86, x86 platforms?
See, I would like to. If you ask me a time frame for when that would happen, I would say I can't really, because it's a matter of what do we prioritize first. You know, we chose mobiles because that's a device that everyone uses all the time. Um, Laptops are definitely something that we are looking at, but we have not invested the resources required to make it work in that. Right? It is what I would call, it requires a different user experience, and it requires a different set of decisions. But yes, we do think there is potential to do that.
Uh, Also, when Bhar OS was initially announced, the demo was shown on Pixel, and Pixel phones usually allow locked bootloader even on custom ROMs, so you can ensure that the integrity was working with Bhar OS when it was on a Pixel. But how will it work on different phones? Like,
That's
uh,
correct. So that is where working with the phone manufacturers is important. I think the uh, the way it works is that the secure bootloaders, um, while different device manufacturers have different implementations of how they do what they call as verified boot, you know, um, that is something that we are dependent on the device manufacturers to support.
lastly, could you clarify how frequently Bhar OS will receive updates? And given Google's periodic QPR releases containing significant OS level changes, will Bhar OS incorporate those updates as well?
See, what we do, Google has a release cycle which does both security updates and feature updates. Okay. So the security updates, basically because our Bhar OS is deployed in closed user group networks. We evaluate what security risks are applicable to them and apply those updates, push those updates at the earliest possible thing. It's There isn't any synchronized mechanism in the world today for um, pushing updates as soon as a security issue is made public. Let us say the various reasons for that. A lot of organizations are doing a lot of good work, but there's no coordinated mechanisms for doing that. And the reason for that is primarily because the Android ecosystem is quite fragmented, because you have the SoC vendors, then you have the ODMs, and then you have people like us, Bhar OS. So we need to coordinate with everyone to make sure that the updates work well on the devices, the platforms that we support.
So will UPI straight up work on Bhar OS? Bhar OS?
UPI does work. It depends on the app, uh, because some of the UPI apps have dependency on Google services. Those apps don't work.
Oh,
But the apps that do not have dependency on Google services, they do work.
so apps like Paytm works, but Google Pay doesn't.
It's a little more complicated than that. I don't want to either endorse one app or the other in UPI, but I can only say that UPI works. We have demonstrated it to people. So
Oh, yes.
Okay, I think we should wrap up here. Leonardo, you are. Can you please do the vote of thanks? Thank you.
Okay, so on behalf of the entire organizing committee, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this panel discussion with Bar OS a resounding success. Anjanea, Agampreet, Ayan, Yash, and everyone else from the organizing committee without whom this panel would not be possible. First and foremost, we are thankful to Mr. Kartik Ayar, Director of J&K Ops, for his acceptance of our invitation to be a panelist. We deeply appreciate his willingness to share his pioneering expertise on this platform. We are immensely grateful to our panelists who join us. Aryan Senat, Pranab Talmale, Sanib Sethi, and Gian Paolo Estacio for taking the time to share their invaluable insights on Bar OS. Your in-depth knowledge and diverse perspectives truly enriched the discussion and provided our audience with a comprehensive understanding of this indigenous mobile operating system's technical roots. We would also like to express our sincere appreciation to our moderator, Yash Reddy, for his skilled facilitation and thought-provoking questions, which kept the discussion engaging and informative throughout. Our special thanks to our sponsors, Xiaomi, for their generous support, and our media partners, Troy Den, Techoran, Adams Tech Tricks, and the YouTube Revans extended community for their promotional efforts, which help us reach a wider audience. Thank you.
well, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Karthik.
yeah, bye bye.
Bye.
Recording.
Okay.
Gimana buat sih dari ngomongnya?
Okay.
Mati.